My name is Avery Bennett. I'm 25 years old. Last Tuesday, my father called me at exactly 9:03 p.m. and told me something that changed my life forever. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about my job. He didn't even say hello. The first words out of his mouth were, "Your sister owes $240,000. You're going to pay it." For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. I laughed. He didn't. I sat up straighter on my couch. "What are you talking about?" My father sighed like I was being difficult. "Emily got herself into some trouble. Credit cards, loans, bad decisions. Family takes care of family. You're paying it." I stared at the wall of my apartment. Emily was my older sister, the golden child, the daughter who could do no wrong, the daughter my parents had spent 28 years rescuing from her own mistakes. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the dependable one, the backup plan. I worked 60 hours a week as a financial analyst in Richmond. I paid my bills. I paid off my student loans. I never asked anyone for help. And apparently, that made me the family ATM. I'm not paying her debt. The silence on the other end lasted 2 seconds. Then my father said the sentence that destroyed whatever relationship we had left. "If you don't, you're not our daughter anymore." No hesitation, no emotion, just a threat. As if my entire place in the family could be canceled because I refused to write a check. I looked around my apartment. Every piece of furniture, every bill, every achievement. I had earned all of it myself. And suddenly I realized something. The only reason they valued me was because they thought they could use me. So I said the only thing left to say. "Then I guess I'm not," and I hung up. The phone rang 3 more times. I ignored every call. Then a text appeared from my mother. "Avery, please don't do this." Another from Emily. "You have no idea what I'm going through." Then another from Dad. "You'll regret this." I turned my phone face down. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. What none of them knew was that I had already discovered something strange 2 weeks earlier. Something I hadn't told anyone. Something involving my credit report. At the time, I thought it was a mistake. By midnight, I was starting to realize it wasn't. And by sunrise, I would learn that my sister's $240,000 debt was only part of the story. The truth was much worse, and 7 days later, my entire family would be standing outside my apartment door, begging me to listen. But by then, it would already be too late. The next morning, I arrived at work running on 3 hours of sleep and way too much coffee. I tried focusing on spreadsheets, tried answering emails, tried pretending my family hadn't just disowned me the night before. None of it worked. Dad's words kept replaying in my head. "If you don't, you're not our daughter anymore." Around noon, I finally gave up and opened my credit monitoring app. The alert that had been bothering me for 2 weeks was still there. 3 hard inquiries, all from lenders near my parents' hometown. At first, I'd assumed it was an error. Now I wasn't so sure. I requested full reports from all 3 credit bureaus. While I waited, my phone buzzed again. "Mom." I ignored it. 5 minutes later, she called again. Then again. Finally, I answered. "Avery, honey, your father didn't mean it." "Really?" He was upset. "No, Mom, he was honest." Silence. I continued. "Did Emily really borrow $240,000? Another pause. Too long. Long enough to tell me everything. "She got into some trouble," Mom whispered. "How much trouble?" No answer. That was answer enough. I ended the call. An hour later, my credit reports arrived. I opened the first one, then the second, then the third. My stomach dropped. There weren't 3 inquiries. There were 6 accounts I didn't recognize. 4 credit cards, one personal loan, one auto loan. Every account had my name attached to it, my social security number, my credit history. But the mailing address wasn't mine. It was my parents' house. I checked the balances. My heart nearly stopped. $18,000, $27,000, $41,000, $33,000, $52,000, $69,000. Total debt, $240,387. The exact amount Dad had demanded I pay. I stared at the screen. Then I checked the opening dates. The oldest account had been opened 3 years ago, the newest one just 8 months earlier. Someone hadn't stolen my identity once. They'd been using it for years. My hands started shaking, not from fear, from realization. Dad already knew about the debt. He knew because he helped create it. I opened Instagram. Emily's profile appeared instantly. Weekend trips, designer handbags, luxury restaurants, a brand new SUV. I scrolled back through 3 years of photos, every vacation, every shopping spree, every smiling selfie. Suddenly all of it made sense. None of it was paid for by Emily. It was financed by someone else's identity. Mine. I felt sick. At 4 p.m., I left work early for the first time in years. I drove straight to my parents' house. 45 minutes later, I pulled into their driveway. Dad was sitting on the porch. Just like always, coffee in one hand, newspaper in the other, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't destroyed my life. I walked up the steps and held out the credit report. "What is this?" He looked down. His face changed immediately. Not confusion, recognition. He knew exactly what I was holding. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly said something that confirmed my worst fear. It was supposed to be temporary. My entire body went cold. Temporary. Not denial, not surprise, a confession. And in that moment, I realized the people I trusted most in the world had been lying to me for years. But what I discovered later that night would prove something even worse. My mother wasn't just covering for them. She had been helping them all along. I stood on my parents' porch staring at my father. It was supposed to be temporary. The words echoed in my head. Temporary. As if stealing someone's identity for 3 years was the same thing as borrowing a lawnmower. Dad looked exhausted, older than I remembered, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt angry. "How long?" I asked. He looked away. "Avery." "How long?" 3 years. The answer hit me like a punch. 3 years. 3 years of lies. 3 years of Sunday dinners. 3 years of hugs, birthdays, and holiday photos while they quietly buried me in debt. The front door opened behind him. My mother stepped outside. The moment she saw the credit report in my hand, her face lost color. She knew. Of course she knew. "Avery, come inside," she said softly. "No." "Honey, did you know?" The question hung in the air. Dad stayed silent. Mom looked at him, then at me, and finally nodded. I felt something inside me break. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet crack, the kind that never fully heals. "You knew?" Tears filled her eyes. "We were trying to protect the family." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insane. "By stealing from me?" "Your father lost everything when the business closed." "And somehow that became my problem?" Neither of them answered, because there was no answer, only excuses. Then the front door opened again. Emily walked outside. She froze when she saw me. "Avery?" I looked at my sister. The designer sunglasses, the expensive handbag, the SUV parked in the driveway. My SUV. My debt. My ruined credit, all standing right in front of me. "How much did you know?" I asked. Emily crossed her arms. Dad handled the finances. Wrong answer. The moment she said it, I knew she wasn't sorry. She was scared. Scared she'd get caught. Avery, you're overreacting. I actually laughed. Overreacting to $250,000 of fraud. I shook my head. Then I got back in my car and left, because there was nothing left to say. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead, I started calling creditors, one by one. Most couldn't tell me much over the phone, but one representative agreed to mail copies of the original applications, including signatures. The signatures. Something about them bothered me. Because if those accounts were opened in my name, somebody had signed my name, and I knew one thing for certain: it wasn't me. 3 days later, the first envelope arrived. I sat at my kitchen table staring at it for almost a minute before opening it. Inside was a credit card application, 3 pages, standard paperwork. Then I reached the signature page. My name was there, Avery Bennett. But it wasn't my handwriting. I knew my signature better than anyone. This wasn't it. I looked closer. The shape of the letters, the way the capital A curved, the way the B leaned slightly right. Suddenly my stomach dropped. I had seen that handwriting before, thousands of times, on birthday cards, school permission slips, Christmas presents, recipe cards, my mother's handwriting. I pulled open a kitchen drawer. Inside was an old birthday card she'd given me years ago. I placed it beside the application. Then I compared them. Same curves, same spacing, same capital letters, same hand. My mother had forged my signature. I sat there frozen. The woman who taught me how to write my name had used that same handwriting to steal it. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to hear her voice, but I answered anyway. Avery. Her voice was shaking, and before she could say another word, I asked the question that changed everything. How many times did you forge my name? The silence on the other end lasted so long that I already knew the answer. It wasn't once, it wasn't twice, and whatever number she was about to give me was going to destroy what little remained of our family. How many times did you forge my name? The silence on the phone stretched so long that I thought the call had disconnected. Then I heard my mother crying, quietly, the way people cry when they know they're caught. Avery. How many times? I don't know. That answer told me everything. If she didn't know the number, it wasn't one application. It wasn't 2. It was years. Years of signatures. Years of lies. Years of looking me in the eye while pretending nothing was wrong. I hung up. For the next hour, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the application. My mother's handwriting. My name. My stolen future. Then I did something my family never expected. I stopped thinking like a daughter and started thinking like an analyst. Facts, evidence, documentation. That's what mattered now. By midnight, I had built a file. Every account, every balance, every statement, every suspicious transaction, every piece of evidence. The file was almost 2 inches thick. The next morning, I called an attorney. Her name was Rachel Carter, a financial fraud specialist. After reviewing everything, she looked at me and said 5 words I'll never forget. This is a criminal case. Not a misunderstanding, not a family disagreement. A crime. A real crime. I felt sick hearing it out loud. Because once something becomes a crime, there are consequences. Real consequences. For everyone involved, including my parents. Rachel explained the process: identity theft report, credit bureau disputes, fraud investigations, police report, documentation, lots of documentation. When she finished, she asked a simple question. Do you want to proceed? I thought about Dad. I thought about Mom. I thought about Emily. Then I thought about the last thing Dad said before hanging up. If you don't pay it, you're not our daughter anymore. The decision suddenly became very easy. Yes. Rachel nodded. Then let's get your life back. That afternoon, I officially filed the fraud reports. Every account, every creditor, every piece of evidence. The process had started, and there was no way to stop it now. 3 days later, the panic began. First came Emily. She called 12 times. I ignored every call. Then came the texts. Please call me. We need to talk. This is getting serious. You don't understand what you've done. I understood perfectly. For the first time in years, consequences had finally arrived. Then my father called. I answered. His voice was different, less confident, more desperate. You need to withdraw those reports. I can't. Then tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't. His breathing became heavier. Avery, this could ruin us. I almost laughed. Could? They had already ruined me, or at least tried to. You should have thought about that 3 years ago. Then I hung up. The next morning my attorney called. Her voice sounded unusually serious. Avery, I need you to be prepared. For what? Several creditors have already confirmed fraud. My heart skipped. What does that mean? It means the accounts are being removed from your name. For the first time in weeks, I felt relief, real relief, like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been suffocating me. But Rachel wasn't finished. There's something else. My stomach tightened. What? The creditors are now forwarding evidence to investigators. The room suddenly felt cold. Evidence. Investigators. The words sounded different now, more real, more dangerous. What happens next? Rachel paused. Your family is going to realize this isn't going away. That evening, my mother left a voicemail. I still remember every word. Avery, please. Your father hasn't slept in days. Emily is terrified. We never meant for this to happen. We thought we'd fix it before you found out. I listened to the message once, then deleted it, because intentions didn't erase what they'd done, and apologies didn't erase forged signatures. 2 days later, another creditor officially removed an account, then another, then another. One by one, the debt began disappearing from my record. But at the exact same time, the pressure on my family was increasing. Collection calls, fraud investigators, questions they couldn't answer, excuses that weren't working anymore. And then, on the 7th day after Dad's ultimatum, my phone rang. It was my father. This time he didn't threaten me. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. Instead, he said something that made me look up immediately. We're coming over. I froze. What? Your mother, Emily, me. His voice sounded hollow, like a man who already knew he'd lost. We need to talk. I looked out the window toward the parking lot below my apartment. Something told me this wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be an ending. And 3 hours later, my entire family would be standing outside my door, begging for one last chance. At 2:57 p.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the file folder in front of me. 3 years of lies, 6 fraudulent accounts, hundreds of pages of evidence, and one family that had destroyed itself. Outside my apartment window, the afternoon sun reflected off parked cars below. Everything looked normal, but nothing was. At exactly 3:01 p.m., my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole. Dad, Mom, Emily, all 3 standing there together. For a moment, I remembered who they used to be. The family vacations, birthday dinners, Christmas mornings, the people I loved. Then I remembered the forged signatures, the debt, the lies, and the ultimatum. If you don't pay it, you're not our daughter anymore. I unlocked the door and opened it. No one spoke, not immediately. Dad looked older, Mom looked exhausted, Emily looked terrified. For several seconds we just stood there. Then Dad finally spoke. "Avery, please. Please." Funny. A week ago he had been giving orders, now he was begging. I stepped aside. 5 minutes. They entered quietly. Nobody sat down until I did. The atmosphere felt less like a family meeting and more like a courtroom. Dad cleared his throat. "The investigators contacted us." I said nothing. Mom started crying almost immediately. Emily stared at the floor. Dad continued. "They said criminal charges are possible." Possible. The word hung in the air. Then he looked directly at me. "You can stop this." I almost smiled. Even now, he still didn't understand. This wasn't about stopping something. This was about consequences finally arriving. "I can't stop it." "You can tell them it was a misunderstanding." "No." "Avery." "No!" The word landed harder than I expected, because for the first time in my life, I meant it completely. Dad looked stunned, like he'd never imagined I could refuse him. Mom wiped her eyes. "We made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I opened the folder, pulled out the applications, and placed them on the table. "Mistakes are forgetting birthdays." I slid the first forged application forward. "This is fraud." The second. "This is fraud." The third. "This is fraud." Nobody touched the papers. Nobody looked at me, because there was nothing left to argue. The evidence spoke for itself. Emily finally broke. "I'm sorry." I looked at her. For years I had protected her, defended her, helped her, and she had watched all of this happen. "What exactly are you sorry for?" She started crying. "The trips, the shopping, the car, the debt, the lies." Each word hit harder than the last. "I didn't think it would get this bad." But it had, and everyone in the room knew it. Dad suddenly stood. "This family is falling apart." I looked him straight in the eyes. "No." His expression changed, confusion, then realization. I continued. "This family fell apart the day you decided my future was worth less than Emily's comfort." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settles when someone finally tells the truth. Mom lowered her head. Dad looked away. Emily cried quietly. For the first time, nobody had an excuse. Nobody had a defense. Nobody had another lie ready. Dad took a slow breath. Then he asked the question I think he already knew the answer to. "Is there any way back from this?" I thought about everything. The stolen identity, the forged signatures, the threats, the betrayal. Then I remembered the night of the phone call. The moment he chose Emily over me. The moment he said I wasn't his daughter anymore. And suddenly, the answer became very simple. I stood up, walked to the front door, opened it. The hallway stretched out behind me. Quiet, empty, waiting. Dad stared at me. Mom started crying again. Emily looked completely broken. And I said the same words that had been sitting in my mind for 7 days. "You missed your chance." Nobody moved. For a few seconds, the entire world felt frozen. Then Dad slowly nodded, as if he finally understood. Not the investigation, not the debt, not the legal consequences. Me. For the first time in his life, he understood he had lost me. Mom stood first, then Emily, then Dad. One by one, they walked toward the door. No yelling, no threats, no arguments, just silence. When they reached the hallway, Dad stopped, turned around, and looked at me one final time. But there was nothing left to say, so he left. The door closed behind them, and just like that, it was over. 3 months later, every fraudulent account had been removed from my credit report. My score recovered. My finances recovered. My life recovered. The investigators continued their work. What happened after that wasn't my responsibility. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped paying the price for someone else's choices. People think boundaries are cruel. They're wrong. Boundaries are what happen when love finally stops being used as a weapon. My parents thought being family meant I owed them everything. What I learned is that family doesn't mean surrendering your future. And sometimes the strongest thing you can say to the people who hurt you most is one simple word: no. And once in a while, that single word changes everything.